the ground beneath Pozzuoli just cracked open. Not a minor tremor, not a routine seismic blip, but an 8-kilometer fracture cutting through one of the most dangerous volcanic systems on the planet. Scientists monitoring Campi Flegrei have been watching this region with white-knuckled anxiety for years. But what the instruments captured in recent weeks has pushed every expert in the room to the edge of their seat. Because this crack is not random. It is not isolated. It appears to trace a direct underground corridor linking the Campi Flegrei supervolcano to the slopes of Mount Vesuvius. And 3.5 million people live directly above it. Picture two of the world's most famous and lethal volcanic systems quietly reaching toward each other beneath the streets of Naples. The same Naples that sits in one of the most densely populated coastal zones in Europe. The same city where apartment blocks rise over ancient Roman ruins and where the morning traffic is as constant as the volcanic tremors beneath the ground. For decades, scientists treated Campi Flegrei and Vesuvius as separate problems, each with its own timeline, its own risk assessment, its own emergency plan. Now, for the first time, the data is forcing a question no one wanted to ask out loud. What if they are not separate at all? To understand what is happening beneath Pozzuoli, you first have to understand what Campi Flegrei actually is. Most people who have heard of this region think of Vesuvius as the dominant threat. But Campi Flegrei, which translates as burning fields, is something altogether more terrifying. It is a caldera, a vast collapsed volcanic structure stretching roughly 13 kilometers across, with its center sitting directly beneath the Phlegreian fields west of Naples. Unlike Vesuvius, which has a single cone and a recognizable summit, Campi Flegrei has no obvious mountain. It is the ground itself. The streets of Pozzuoli, the harbors, the parks, the neighborhoods, all of them sit on top of this system. And the system has been waking up. The phenomenon driving the current crisis is called bradycism. It describes the slow rising and sinking of the ground caused by pressure changes in the magma and hydrothermal fluids deep below. Pozzuoli has been experiencing this for centuries. Ancient Roman columns at the Masella marketplace bear the permanent record of these movements in the form of boreholes drilled by mollusks that thrived when the columns stood underwater, pushed down during a previous phase of subsidence. Those same columns are now above sea level. The ground rose and lifted them back up. What is happening today is the same process, but at a pace and intensity that has not been recorded in the modern era. Since 2005, the ground at Campi Flegrei has been rising almost continuously. By 2023, the total uplift had exceeded 1 meter in some areas. That number sounds modest until you realize it represents an enormous accumulation of pressure from below, pressure that has nowhere to go except upward or eventually outward. Seismologists logged thousands of small earthquakes, many too small to feel, others strong enough to rattle windows and send residents into the streets. Then came the swarms, not dozens of tremors, but hundreds, clustering beneath the western edge of the caldera with a frequency and depth that pointed to fresh activity in the deeper parts of the system. It was during analysis of one of these swarm sequences that researchers identified something that stopped the conversation cold. The fracture pattern was not confined to the known boundaries of the Campi Flegrei caldera. It extended, not in a random direction, not toward open water, but along a corridor that pointed northeast in the direction of Vesuvius, roughly 8 kilometers away. Ground deformation data from satellite radar confirmed it. Infrasound sensors caught a signature traveling along that same corridor. The crack in the earth beneath Pozzuoli was not just opening up, it appeared to be connecting to something. Dr. Mauro Di Vito, head of the Vesuvian Observatory, was among the first scientists briefed on the emerging data. According to internal communications reviewed by researchers at the Istituto Nazionale di Geofisica e Vulcanologia, the initial reaction inside the scientific community was controlled alarm, not panic, but the quiet, concentrated focus of people who know what the numbers mean and do not want to believe them. The concern was specific. The fracture corridor, if confirmed, could represent a pathway through which hydrothermal fluids, gases, or even magmatic material might migrate between the two systems. Not necessarily enough to cause immediate eruption, but enough to change the stress field, enough to prime one system with energy from the other. Independent geophysicist Dr. Carlo Trois put the structural risk in terms that were impossible to dismiss. He described a zone of weakness stretching between the two calderas, a region of crust that has been repeatedly fractured, heated, and chemically altered over hundreds of thousands of years of volcanic activity. In such a zone, a fracture does not need to carry lava to change everything. It only needs to carry pressure. And pressure, once transferred, does not announce itself. It builds quietly until the geology can no longer absorb it. The last major eruption in the Campi Flegrei system was Monte Nuovo in 1538. It was a relatively modest event by the standards of what this caldera is capable of, but it was preceded by decades of ground uplift and seismic unrest that looks, in hindsight, remarkably similar to what is being observed now. The last truly catastrophic eruption from Campi Flegrei occurred roughly 39,000 years ago. That event, known as the Campanian Ignimbrate, deposited ash across Europe, the Middle East, and even parts of Central Asia. It is considered one of the largest volcanic events of the past 200,000 years. Scientists are not saying that is what is coming, but they are saying that the system capable of it is showing signs of life unlike anything in the recorded modern history of the region. Meanwhile, Vesuvius itself has not erupted since 1944. That eruption was the last in a long historical series, and in the 80 years since, the volcano has settled into what volcanologists call a quiescent state. But quiescent is not quiet. Instruments detect ongoing seismicity, ongoing hydrothermal activity, ongoing degassing. The volcano is breathing. And if the corridor connecting it to Campi Flegrei is real, then everything that system is exhaling now has a potential pathway into the hydrothermal infrastructure of Vesuvius as well. On the ground in Pozzuoli, ordinary life has been anything but ordinary for the families living closest to the action. Maria Esposito, a retired schoolteacher, has lived in the same apartment block near the waterfront for 38 years. She has felt the ground move dozens of times. She has watched neighbors pack up and leave during the worst swarm sequences. She has sat through civil defense briefings that told her to stay calm while the building around her groaned. But the events of recent weeks, she says, felt different. The cracks in her building's walls reappeared not along the old lines, but in new places. The floor tilted in a direction she had not noticed before. She told journalists from Il Mattino that she had started sleeping with her shoes beside the bed. Her experience is not unusual. Thousands of residents in the red zone surrounding the caldera have filed complaints with local authorities about structural damage. Civil defense has deployed mobile monitoring units throughout the most affected neighborhoods. Engineers have assessed hundreds of buildings, flagging dozens for precautionary closure. Evacuation drills, which had been scheduled for the autumn, were quietly moved forward. Officials from the Protezione Civile issued updated guidance reminding residents of the predetermined evacuation routes and the assembly points assigned to each neighborhood. The language was measured. The message between the lines was not. For emergency planners, the sheer scale of the population at risk is the variable that keeps people awake at night. The red zone around Campi Flegrei contains roughly 500,000 people. Add the broader yellow zone and parts of the Naples metropolitan area that could be affected by ashfall, pyroclastic surges, or secondary effects, and the figure climbs to 3.5 million. Evacuating that many people is not just a logistical challenge. It is one of the most complex civil defense scenarios ever studied in Europe. The road network out of Naples was not designed for simultaneous mass movement. Trains, ferries, and highways would be overwhelmed in hours. In a fast-moving eruption scenario, hours may be all that is available. The Italian government approved a new voluntary relocation incentive program several years ago, offering financial support to residents of the red zone who choose to move permanently. Uptake has been modest. People are attached to their land, their communities, their history. The same volcanic soil that creates risk is what has made this region so fertile, so beautiful, so deeply inhabited for millennia. You cannot separate the danger from the place. They are the same thing. Back in the laboratories, the debate over the 8-kilometer fracture corridor is intense and ongoing. Not all scientists accept the connectivity hypothesis. Dr. Francesca Bianco at the INGV has publicly urged caution, noting that the fracture pattern could reflect independent responses to a common regional stress field, rather than a physical connection between the two magmatic systems. Seismic tomography across the corridor shows heterogeneous crust, not a clean conduit, and there is no confirmed low-velocity zone tracing the full 8-kilometer length. The interpretation, she argues, is plausible, but not yet proven. Others push back in the opposite direction. The correlation between the fracture orientation, the deformation signal, and the gas emission. Anomalies detected along the corridor is too consistent to be coincidental, according to researchers at the University of Naples. Federico II, who published a preliminary analysis flagging the connection for peer review, their data shows elevated carbon dioxide readings at surface monitoring stations positioned between the two systems, readings that cannot be explained by either volcano acting alone. The gas has to be coming from somewhere beneath the corridor itself. That detail matters more than it might seem. Carbon dioxide at elevated concentrations at the surface means that fluid pathways already exist. The system is already exhaling. Whatever debate remains about the structural connectivity of the fracture at depth, the chemistry of the ground between Pozzuoli and Vesuvius is telling its own story. And that story points to a subsurface that is more active, more interconnected, and more pressurized than the models built a decade ago were designed to handle. The European Commission's scientific advisory body for volcanic risk has convened emergency sessions to review the incoming data. Representatives from the civil protection agencies of Italy, France, Germany, and Greece attended a closed briefing in Rome in which the corridor fracture was presented as a priority monitoring issue. The meeting produced a call for expanded satellite radar coverage, additional deep borehole sensors, and a joint reassessment of evacuation plans across the entire Campanian volcanic zone. The final communiqué described the situation as evolving and demanding accelerated scientific response. For the people of Pozzuoli, Naples, and the towns scattered across the Phlegrean fields, that language translates into something much simpler. The ground is moving. The cracks are new, and the system that has shaped this land since before Rome was built is restless in a way that even the scientists cannot fully explain. Every family in the red zone makes the same calculation every day. Do we stay, or do we go? Do we trust the instruments, the officials, the evacuation plans, or do we look at the cracks in the walls and the tilting floors and make our own judgment? That calculation is getting harder. The fracture beneath Pozzuoli is 8 kilometers long. It runs toward a mountain that has not erupted in 80 years and sits above a city of 3.5 million people. The laboratories are still working on what the data means. The satellites keep passing overhead. The sensors keep recording, and the ground for now keeps moving. The question is no longer whether Campi Flegrei is waking up. The question is what it will do when it fully opens its eyes, and whether the system next door will answer.